how do you take it or think about like $1 billion revenue versus a $50 million revenue stream?
I think the way you build as a tiny startup with the way you get first 2-3 customers is just by pulling on your connections and cutting favors.
I have seen enough founders like, look, I don't have to worry about $1 billion revenue stream because eventually I'll sell it off to someone. I think that's where the bias really comes in. For every founder, the struggle is real. How much horizontal, how much vertical. But then once money is more expensive, well, I didn't solve hard enough problems.
Below a certain price point, you are like, you see the value.
Then you're an acquisition target, and then you have to sell your company to someone else. So biases actually come in here in a big way as well. So I think the struggle is real. Am I quickly trying to build a $50 million ARR business and sell it off? Or will I look down the barrel of a gun because at 50 I don't know what to do next? Welcome back, Amit.
Yeah, you had a fun summer?
Really good. We went to New Zealand, and it's one of the most picturesque parts of the world that my wife and children and I have been to.
Yeah.
In fact, we asked the children about the vacation, and they said that Japan and New Zealand are two of the favorite places, so we have to keep going back.
Oh, nice. We spent some time in Japan this summer and then in India.
Oh, wow. And how was Japan?
Japan was really amazing. The most fun experience I had was a place called Team Lab. It's a museum which is supposed to stimulate all your senses. So it's unlike other museum where like all your senses are engaged. You're like walking in knee-deep water. You're immersed in 3D lighting, like a matrix of lighting.
You sounded like a Silicon Valley CEO. I need to immerse in all my senses. Oh gosh. And even for us, we took a road trip actually. We decided to fly there to Auckland. And we took a road trip through the North and the South Islands. And Queenstown and that whole area is like, it's as south as it gets in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
Just beautiful, man. Beautiful. If you thought US was beautiful, the parts of the world that are just so amazing.
Yeah.
So do you feel rejuvenated, charged up to actually come and really spend the next 10, 12 months before the next summer?
Oh, it's been 5-6 weeks since I came back. So the vacation feels like distant past.
Yeah, I feel like in my first company, and the children were small as well. So we didn't actually go out as much.
Yeah. And
the twins were premature, so we spent a lot. My wife obviously did a lot of the hard work, but we were not traveling as much. And I think at Devrev, it's been a lot of work hard and play harder.
Yeah.
Which is something I heard in New Zealand quite a bit as well. Work hard, play harder. Do you think that's coming together for you as well?
Oh yeah, the work and play have intermingled and intermixed for me. So it's not like I'm taking a lot of trips or just going and playing squash, but having fun with work instead of it being stressful.
What I liked about travel,
yeah.
I mean, we have 3 kids, is how, because otherwise with so much sort of company building that goes on a day-to-day basis, you don't get to keep your phone on the side and emails on the side and Slack on the side and all this stuff on the side, and really spend time with family as much as you do when you're on a vacation. It just becomes, and I'm very good at it. I don't look at it for 10 hours and the phone is just kept on the side. I don't know if you actually have a similar experience.
Not in travel, because before we left, me and my daughter did a painting of Mount Fuji together. And that was a very nice, immersive, meditative kind of experience where we just into the colors and the shades and fixing it. And
So you're into art as well then?
a little bit. This was one of my COVID things. I started following a YouTube channel that taught me how to do landscape painting. Yeah, it's been
Fascinating. I think I have an appreciation for art. I've never tried my hand at really trying it out myself. I think I have a good taste for it. I don't know, do you think it's possible for anybody to pick it up, or do you need a little bit of...
I believed I had not a single gene for art.
You're saying if you can do it, I can too. Yeah, obviously there is something to be said about persistence.
Yeah.
I look at my son play basketball and it's just, he's so tenacious. His hard work gives me so much of courage to build a company as well. Look at the amount of sweat he's actually going through, which is just mind-boggling. Children at the age of 12, 13, 14 are working so hard.
Yeah.
And I've struggled to really think about adversity because we went through pretty middle-class upbringing and all that. So we had a lot of things to worry about. But for them to really recreate adversity, I think it comes through sports. I don't know if you think about adversity.
I do think adversity is a pretty important part of building a human being.
And for them, I think sports is actually a big one. Are you having your daughter go through sports and all that, or?
She is going through her own thing. She's not much into sports. But so here's a fun thing. We were talking about she wants to build a product and put it out there, and she's in 6th grade. So we were talking about what could she build, and she had this idea of building a software that helps kids like her learn coding. And then I was telling her, you'll have to do user research. So she used Lovable, built a website for herself to teach coding classes, sent it out, signed up kids, created a 4-week program to teach kids. And so she's giving value to people, but also collecting information so that she could do her user research and build her product.
Fascinating.
And whenever you put yourself out there, you're being vulnerable, right? Whether people
are going to use
it, come in,
like it.
Yeah. Will they join the class? Will they follow her instructions? So I think some of that stuff, I think, has been really good.
Which is also adversity on every week, because we tend to think about podcasts and viewership and all this stuff. Imagine for children who are 11, 12 years old, how do they think about feedback and likes and dislikes and things like that? Fascinating. We'll talk about Lovable in the course of today's episode as well, but looks like what you and I agreed to really bring out is breadth versus depth in some sense. AI is everything and AI is nothing.
Yeah.
Because you could say that if you solve everything, you solve nothing.
Yeah.
And in that vein, one of the things that you and I have really grappled with in the last couple of years has been strategy in company building. And how do you think about platforms versus use cases, horizontal versus vertical?
Yeah.
And now that everybody wants to build their sort of skill sets as well, because they have the will to learn AI, everybody wants to build their skills. And there is OpenAI, and there is Anthropic, and then there is all things Gemini. So people also want to do it themselves.
Yeah.
So the question is, beyond these 3 hyperscalers, how do you build a platform which is horizontal enough?
Yeah.
And who do you cater to? Because there's multiple segments of the market you can go after. There's the base of the pyramid, and then there is the top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
And some of this actually happened with even workflows 20 years ago, automation. Now AI is beyond automation, but into intelligence and reasoning. But even in the world of automation, there was the base of the pyramid workflow platforms. And of course, there was Apple doing some sort of automation for your personal lives and things like that. So automation was everywhere. AI is everywhere. And yet you had to pick and choose where do you work. You be like ServiceNow and build extremely deep enterprise grade workflows, or do you build consumer grade things like N10 and Zapier and Workato, or even like Apple.
Yeah.
So there is the horizontal play, and then there's a vertical play.
Yeah.
which is like, how do you just go after one industry, one vertical, and maybe one department, which is still quasi-horizontal, quasi-vertical, because sales could be an example, but sales in a pharma company is very different than sales in a B2B SaaS company and so on, right? So we probably have that thing to talk about today, and I wonder if you want to kickstart this discussion about horizontal versus vertical.
Yeah, so I think in some sense, everybody that I talked to, their advice was pick something narrow. And I struggled with it because by heart I'm a technologist. And what gets me going, what gets me fired up is figuring out some cool algorithm, some cool way of doing things that earlier wasn't possible. And this way of thinking is not attached to any vertical, not attached to any specific problem. And the other thing that I feel very much is true is that what makes AI different than any other era of software building is that you're really talking about doing something that is at the same level of sophistication as a human being. And human beings are not narrow. Human beings have a lot of breadth. And like, even if somebody is working as an engineer, they have the ability to go and understand everything around the world in which their engineering is. So I think in some sense, I feel that the true AI solutions are the winning AI solution is not going to be super narrow.
Because it has to keep evolving.
Yeah. So somebody gave me this example which was very interesting to me, that imagine if you decided to build an LLM just to play the role of a doctor, and you decided that you're just going to feed it all the medical text. And then a patient comes and says, I have a bad headache because I went to a Taylor Swift concert last night. Now, somebody needs to stitch together the fact that concert means alcohol, late at night, alcohol, possibly communicable diseases, and then relate it to the medical stuff. So I do think that the winning AI solutions will have a lot of breadth. But the other side, which was hard pill to swallow for me, was that if you leave everything open, you don't know who your buyer is, what their persona is. You don't know how to talk to them, how to market them. You don't know what systems you need to have a rock solid integration with. And so every time you are talking to a customer, their needs are different, and then you're peanut buttering.
Looks like what you're saying is that there needs to be enough context that is broad enough.
Yeah.
But there needs to be enough specificity when it comes to a persona and a use case. Yeah. So there's a paradox here. You need to balance that. So it looks like you're saying there is a real paradox. You got to know enough context. Yeah. Like a good doctor would.
Yeah.
And then yet they have to be deep as well.
To give you another example, I was talking to a friend who's building in security space, and like it was traditional software, then they just added MCP servers, so now you can chat with their APIs, and you're saying, what else can I do with AI so that I'm ahead of the curve? And we talked a bunch, and what we realized was that like it needs to do what you expect a human being to do. If you're seeing an exception, pick up the phone and call the person and verify whether they're really doing this or not. And so I don't know if that's breadth, that like the single thing, email, can make phone calls.
In the old world, to do all that, I would use a Zapier to send out an email, because it's not like the apps didn't need these arms and legs for various actions and little IFTTTs and workflows. They also needed those things. And the agents will need that connective tissue with an existing world where the arms and legs can send out email, can post on Slack channel, or do a phone call and things like that. All those things are needed in pretty much every function, whether you're a healthcare vertical or a federal vertical or a transportation or SaaS or what have you. The question of product management comes in, which is, are you catering to a builder persona or to an end user who is not tech savvy persona? Because when you're really catering to a lawyer in a law firm, they are not people who are building agents and building skills and workflows and things like that. And you have to be extremely, in a good way, dumbing down the product to the point where it looks like it's ChatGPT for them or something. In their personal lives, they've gotten used to ChatGPT and that interface. So you bring that kind of simplification versus if you were really building a horizontal company, then you have to think about IT, and IT has engineers and maybe low code, no code people, lots of low code, no code people who want drag and drop interfaces and things like that. So is that also the barbell that one has to think about?
So that's interesting. I think the way I'm taking what you're saying is that if you're building a horizontal company, then what you're giving is not the finished use case. It's somebody else needs to be building on top of it to bring in the context of the end user who's to be served. And that could be an IT builder, and that could be like a citizen builder. And all these boundaries are blurring. Like CRO of Shopify is saying that everyone in his sales team, like A's, not just SEs, but like A's and sales ops people need to be creating their own agents. And if they're not doing that, then probably they're not doing their job well.
Yeah, obviously there is the ChatGPT way of building something.
Yeah.
And the question is there a ChatGPT like builder within the enterprise that for this, if I salesperson has access to their opportunity record and their contact record and all sorts of things. And I think that's the missing piece there, right?
Yeah. And so what I've seen is that yes, you can do these things, like you can express your intent and it will generate code. But if you don't have good integrations with the set of things that you need, then there's only so much a citizen developer can do.
And what IT will allow for.
Yeah,
Imagine if you, even 10 years ago, if you wrote an IFTTT with, let's say, Mercato or Zapier, what if it went berserk and updated stuff and so on? So people didn't allow for those kind of citizen builders to go and do whatever they wanted, because Zapier was not blessed enough by IT for various things. It's one thing to use it in a small shop versus to use it in a company that has 2,000 salespeople or something. So some of that will also come down to governance. Go back to your data days as well. The data warehouse is something that it's not like anybody and everybody has access to, which is the reason why it became like, no, IT owns it. You're not allowed to touch it. It's like a shared asset. So what's your point of view on citizen building and governance, which are again at odds with each other?
So this is a topic very near and dear to my heart. So even at ThoughtSpot, the original hypothesis was that almost anybody should be able to ask a data question and get an answer. And there was a big piece of it, which was technology, which mostly we solved for. But then the other big piece of it was adoption and who really wants to do it and when do they want to do it. And what we realized was that the distribution is very much like social networks. So there's this famous paper that says that if you look at any group of people in social network, there may be 5% of the people who are content creators and maybe another 10 to 15% who comment and like, and rest of them are just passively.
Lurkers,
And so what we found even in analytics was that there's these 5 to 10% power users who really enjoy this and want to create it. Vast majority of them want to look at fixed dashboards, but then when they look at that number, they have some questions that are not answered by that dashboard. And now they need to ask a question that is not there. So it's less about creating a question from scratch and more about taking a question and modifying it to get the next answer and the next answer and the next answer.
I'm smiling because coming from a file server database world, the benchmarks were also very much like social network stats that you just said. Like 80% of a SpecFS benchmark for NFS was read-only. The last 20% is writes and things that mutate stuff. Even TPCC, TPCH benchmarks, a lot of them were just read-only things. And it has basically reflected itself in the world of social networks just as much. And even this idea of give me the last mile to edit is something that has existed with the idea of templates. Like the reason why ServiceNow did so was because they thought about that. Okay, we got to create these templates and let people go tinker the last mile of a template or something. And doing that well is also a big design problem. You
put your finger on the problem.
So which I typically do, actually.
So that's why I feel that what a citizen builder really needs is to take something that's 80-90% of there, but then hyper-personalize it for themselves. And I think that's going to be the most powerful use of AI-based code generation. Because even in case of SQL, what we realized was that in order for somebody to go ask the precise question that gives you something very simple like last week's revenue, is fairly complex. There's going to be probably 10 filters that gets built almost like a software product that somebody says that I don't want to count the revenue of product that was returned. Somebody else says that don't use this number for partner revenue because we are paying 30%. And then there's all kinds of context that's needed. So most business users don't feel confident to just go and ask that question. But if the question has already been asked and blessed, and now they're looking at their revenue number for last week and they want to break it down by product and then sort it and then exclude certain things because they see an anomaly, and then from there correlate it with something else, that they will do day in, day out. And so one of the most powerful things that I feel I built at ThoughtSpot was this ability to manipulate queries with simple instructions.
But coming back to building versus using, the fact that you're actually going and building it for end users and in a very vertical way versus building it for IT people who are then building it for the end users. What's your current thinking on whatever you're doing in the current company that you have and so on? So say more on that in terms of the trade-offs and the barbells that you're having to go through.
So I think that there's, at least in my mind, there's interesting arguments on both sides. So the idea of a vertical company is that you immerse yourself into a narrow group of users. You see their problems, you see their pain points, design a bespoke solution which has all the context in it, and there's a lot of product management that goes into it. There's a lot of custom feedback loops that goes into it. And you're crafting this so that the end user gets a delightful experience. And there's obviously value in it. But what I've seen is that because you're expecting so much sophistication from AI, that even after that, there's a big gap between what you can deliver by talking to 40 customers and doing the least common denominator versus what the person really needs in the moment. And that gap can only be bridged by having a feedback loop where the end user is in the driving seat.
And then maybe connect it to customization and extensibility. Maybe what you were saying in the last 30 seconds is how customizable is it? Because if it were to be complete black box, zero customization, then maybe it's only built for not just the end user, but only the SMB segment of the market. Do you have a point of view on what does customizability, extensibility mean? Even if you want to build it for the mid-market or the large enterprise. Because look at horizontal companies like ServiceNow and Salesforce. But I felt like they had to go that extra mile even on thinking about templates, for example. And people would say that ServiceNow had good templates, but I would say that even Salesforce with its object model had good templates. Think
Yeah,
about
yeah.
BFSIs versus transportation versus healthcare and so on. So the idea of being specific, even when you're a horizontal company, is still really important.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Otherwise, you're competing AWS and Azure and
Yeah.
GCP or something, right?
yeah, yeah.
Is it true that vertical companies have to be enough customizable and horizontal companies have to be enough specific?
Yeah, so for vertical companies, templates was the old way of giving customization. But the beauty of having LLM and code generation is that you don't have to limit yourself within those things. I'll give you an example. I was building an agent yesterday to give feedback and coaching to somebody on how well they did in talking to customers. And as I was reading through it, I was feeling like, dude, you're giving feedback to somebody who's head of sales in that organization. And the way you're giving feedback seems like you're talking to a rookie.
Which is very pedantic.
Yeah. And maybe for a rookie, this is good feedback. But now, how do you bring that information in and change that completely? With LLMs, you just provide an extra input into the prompt and the whole thing changes. But this is something that you could never have done with templates. And you were building a chat interface, and the chat interface was looking at audio and then picking out individual turn-by-turn interactions and saying what is good and what is bad. You can do all of that in chat-based interface. But if you know that context, you can actually custom build a UI component that makes each turn like a card with what was said and what was the feedback. And now it's a much more delightful experience. Mm-hmm. So I feel like customizability broadly captures it, but the fact that you can dynamically generate code and you can dynamically generate text with all the context that you have is what I feel the winning products of tomorrow are going to.
And I think going back to selling, we'll get into selling as well, or distribution, let's call it distribution.
Yeah.
Is there a dichotomy between the way horizontal companies sell versus the way vertical companies sell?
Yeah.
This could be, look at horizontal companies like Lovable, or companies that have become viral in the AI world right now. Cursor is the case more. It's a horizontal company. You need the same agent, whether you're a healthcare company or whether you're a pharma company, doesn't really matter. The way they've been going about it is through PLG, which is a word that we started looking at 10 years ago, and it's back with a bang. And the other end of the spectrum is VCs. There was this famous blog from Andreessen Horowitz about forward deployed engineering, because look at Palantir stock and see what that means. Yet Palantir was vertical early on with federal and Department of Defense and so on. What's that dichotomy look like in terms of distribution of horizontal plays versus vertical plays? Because now Palantir is somewhat horizontal, and yet they're extremely forward deployed with respect to engineering versus a Lovable or a Cursor. Do you have a point of view on distribution?
So it seems to me that it's a function of price point. Because below a certain price point, you are like, you see the value and you don't see the risk, and so you're willing to try. Above a certain price point, the thing that matters the most is, can I trust this person to do the right thing and be there for me? And if something goes wrong, does it hurt them enough that I can count on them doing everything in their power to make things work for me? And
say more on price, because people confuse an invoice or a bill, which could be $200,000 a month, like at AWS in 2015. I could be getting a monthly bill of $200,000 and not talking to any salesperson because there was an API that was being priced at less than a cent, and it accumulate to $200,000 a month. And yet I'm not talking to any sales because the API was easy to consume. And it was explainable without having really, and of course over time as I had to cost optimize it, I would talk to experts and so on. But what does price mean when you say price? So that it's not confused with billing and invoicing.
I guess maybe price is the wrong word. Maybe risk is the right word. In AWS example, the thing at this point is pretty mechanical, right? There's enough proof point that I know that if I get a VM from AWS, it's mostly going to behave. If I get storage from AWS, it's mostly going to behave the way I expect it to. And I also have fine-grained control that how much I consume. So the risk that I spend $200K and not get the value out of it is mostly on my side. That did I use the resources that I consumed or not?
Yeah, and I think it ties back to, as you said, the friction of distribution. API was imminently accessible. Spinning up a VPC, or as they would call it, build a data center in 5 minutes was easy. And the easier you make it, and the more trustworthy your bill or your invoice, the fact that it's highly explainable. Consumption is how they really built what they had to build. Even at Adobe, look, the digital media business is like $16 billion plus or something. And yet a big chunk of it is PLG. Now, of course, in the large enterprise, you have to go there and create an ELA and of sorts. But there's something about it that even when you're making $16 billion, you can probably do this with a PLG-like motion. You can see that come out of all these other companies, Slack and Notion and Figma and all these companies. I think my head is you have got to make it really easy, really simple, and simpler than what even I would say companies like Canva and Figma and Notion and Slack and Adobe and others have actually done. Because even in the sort of large enterprise, you do need a lot around security and like thinking about compliance, data residency, all sorts of things as well, because I think the large enterprise only trusts you, even if you have a viral product, if you have actually made sure that their other product management requirements taken care of. But I think going back to the vertical versus horizontal thing again, is it also a function of ambition and interest of the founder to really say, look, I think I know what exactly I could be good at. And then maybe if I just did one vertical really well, I'll have a chance to go to another vertical. What do you think about that bias of a founder?
So I definitely think it's a function of the bias of the founder. And the way I've experienced this is that we wanted to build a pretty horizontal AI platform. And the core idea was that there's so much context locked in people's head that is not there in the models. And if we can find a way to pull that context out of people's head and into the agent's memory, we can build agents that are much better than anybody else. And I had some experience doing that at ThoughtSpot. And the main thing that really makes it work is that we had this intermediate language which is accessible to everybody but is also precise enough that if you define everything precisely in there, then everything from there is deterministic. Right? So that allows end users to ask something vague, get something precise, manipulate it, and then get exactly what they wanted, and also teach the system how to do it. So we wanted to take this horizontal idea and apply it to everything. And after a while realized that it's not going to work. It's not just a question of technology, it's a question of knowing who you sell to and how you message and how you market.
And why is that? Is it because memory and context was just too hard to engineer?
More important than that, I think the way you build as a tiny startup, with the way you get first 2-3 customers is just by pulling on your connections and cutting favors and showing some vision to people who are excited about it. But beyond that, you want the process to be a lot easier and more repeatable. So you need proof points, and you need to be able to show evidence that you've solved similar problems in other places. And it's not just about just showing. Every time we ended up attacking a new problem, we realized that we ourselves had to build a lot of context around that persona and that vertical.
So what does that mean? Templates or customizability?
So we started working initially with the pharmaceutical company, right? And within their...
This is a thought spotter here.
This is at A79.
Yeah.
So this is within their medical affairs division.
So the thing is, because you're still in stealth, I'm calling it here, and your current company, not using the word A70. I should be doing more of that.
So now we are deep inside a pharmaceutical company. We are understanding how does a medical science liaison go talk to the doctor? What do they care about? What are their objectives in these meetings? Why do they want all this collected into an insight? What are the things that people are looking in insight? So all of this requires building a lot of context in our heads about that domain, and then be the product manager for this medical affairs product while we are trying to build this horizontal platform and thinking about that. And then the next customer we talk to is again in pharmaceutical, but in patient services. Patient services is completely different, where they're calling patients and doctors to get pre-authorization done and medicine dispensed and things like that. And now they have completely different they live in a completely different world, and we are spending months trying to understand this, build connection to those people, learn how to speak in their language. And then we went to a private equity company, and even private equity, there's like a mid-market, like mid-cap company that buys software versus a roll-up company that's buying transportation companies and aggregating them. And so the kind of AI they wanted to do was different than this. And the fundamental idea of taking what a human being is doing, giving the instruction that you'll give to an intern, to an AI agent, making it works. But the product management aspect of it is not scalable. And maybe it is scalable when you have the Palantir model, where you have forward deployed engineers.
And you're doing very large deals.
Yeah.
In fact, I have come to the conclusion that there's 3 things, like most things in life, there are 3 things you need to give to a customer for specificity.
Yeah.
There's connectors for data, like they have a lot of data, a lot of systems.
Yeah.
And you need to connect all that data, because that's context. Data is context. Then there's code, which is workflows. How do you build workflows? Because you need to stitch all this data at runtime and conversationally invoke it. So you need to build code that is conversationally invoked. And finally, there's weights, like for maybe 4% of your customers, you need to really do beyond prompt engineering, build models for them, and that will be about fine-tuning weights as well. So on a constant basis, you have to deliver data, you have to deliver code, you have to deliver weights. And when I say even after having delivered a connector, the question is who's responsible for data engineering, data pipelines, error rates, all sorts of ETL, reverse ETL problems as well.
Yeah.
So you got to keep delivering on that as well. So data, code, and weights can be a subscription business. Now, delivering that specific data connector for this vertical versus that vertical, as you said, is a product management problem. And I think the hardest thing there is prioritization.
Yeah.
Because you only have so many constrained resources. So how do you build connectors for the first pharma use case versus the second pharma use case versus the third PE use case versus the fourth PE use case? Looks like it's really about sequencing.
Yeah.
More so than anything else. And this is where I feel like founders who bring their bias will say, look, you still have to sequence it because you have constrained resources. You have to prioritize things. The question is, how do you take it or think about $1 billion revenue versus a $50 million revenue stream? And I have seen enough founders like, look, I don't have to worry about $1 billion revenue stream because eventually I'll sell it off to someone. or I'll acquire my way into other use cases, and I can sleep well even if the 2, 3, 4 acquisitions don't have the same stack that my original use case actually had. And that is a way of building a company. Personally, I don't sleep well when I don't have leverage, not just in sales and marketing, which is what acquisitions give you. You can reduce the number of salespeople through acquisitions, the same buyer, but you're now selling like the way Salesforce or Oracle sold, which is a bundle of things that are not optimized at the core with a common leverage, common stack, common search engine, common analytics, common workflows, common databases. I think that's where the bias really comes in. So when we were looking at DevRev, I think we said, look, we need to have leverage on the sales and marketing side. CIO becomes a common buyer in many of these things, because that matters when you're going vertical versus horizontal. But then there's also leverage on the technology side or not. We felt like we are good with infrastructure. Even AI has massive needs for infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, not just the object model and the event model and the security model, the API model, the SQL model, but also just authorization, authentication. But you build on top of search, analytics, workflows. All these things are just infrastructure. And if you're good at infrastructure, then would you rather build a horizontal company? And I think that's how we have thought about this. That look, you have to think about this very horizontally, and yet you have to prioritize on data and code and weights, which is a sequencing problem. Now, to build great data connectors, you want to do this repeatably, you need a great framework. To build great workflows, you need a great workflow engine. We call it skills. And that itself needs to have great UI. So you have to think like Lovable, even when you're building a workflow engine. You have to think like Lovable when you think about a data engine that's connecting to their legacy systems and things like that as well. So I think the struggle is real. It looks like for every founder, the struggle is real. How much horizontal, how much vertical. But it does come down to biases. Like, am I good at generalizing the problem statement where I have really good abstractions to bring in data, bring in code, and bring in weights and things like that as well. And for, as you said, I think there's something about price points that matters too. If you're good at $10,000 products, simply because you're good at inside sales machinery. A company like Gong did a good job of that. But then once money is more expensive, you're like, wow, I didn't solve hard enough problems. And then you look down the barrel and like, wow, I don't have enough buyers, enough use cases in the adjacency. And that actually becomes a problem. Then you're an acquisition target, and then you have to sell your company to someone else. So biases actually come in here in a big way as well.
There's two interesting advice that I've gotten from two different investors, which kind of resonated with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So one was that most successful companies look like Hourglass. You start very wide, you start exploring till you find that one thing that's working really well. And then in the middle, you put all your energy into making that super successful. And once you're on the other side of the hourglass, then you start expanding. You're taking what worked and then adding more adjacencies, and that's how you go. But that having that middle part is really important for success. And then having the ability to expand out there. And maybe some forethought around that, like what would those expansions look like? But execution-wise, you're really constraining yourself to one narrow thing in the middle.
Yeah, it's like quantum mechanics. Life just goes like this. Yeah. At some level, it's like a sinusoidal curve or some such thing where you have crests and troughs. In the book, Only the Paranoid Survive, Andy actually talks about this paradox. This to me is a paradox. And by the way, it won't finish there. You'll have to go back again because you created complexity again and you have to simplify it. Then you create complexity again. He has 2 chapters in his book, Only the Paranoid Survive, which is typically what VCs advise you to do, be paranoid about things, right? Chapter 7 is Let Chaos Reign. And this reign is with a G. Let chaos reign. And the next chapter is rein in the chaos.
Yeah.
And this is without the G.
Yeah.
Rein in the chaos.
Yeah.
And I have seen this to be extremely instructive in company building. Let chaos reign in the chaos. Let chaos reign in the chaos. If anything, I think Intel probably got so good at reigning in the chaos that they didn't let enough chaos reign with GPU architectures and non-CISC architectures and things like that, which is the reason why it's looking down the barrel right now. So I feel like it's really important to think about both of these chapters in pretty much everything you do.
Yeah.
Simply because what happens is when you let chaos reign and you have too many use cases, too many customers, too many verticals, prioritization will actually become a real issue. Sequencing will become a real issue, and customer success is part of that whole thing. You can't lose customers. And in a lot of PLG companies, they're okay with churn. That fine, it's $5,000, who cares kind of stuff. And in fact, even in VC models and P&L models, there is a bemoaning of the churn, but it's like you have normalized churn, GRR and NDRR and all these things. I can't live with it. Simply, that's the way I'm like, it's not good. In fact, in $10 ASP companies, when you talk about pricing, there's a lot of churn built in. And simply because you were attracting eyeballs. And you're like, fine, they were way up at the top of the funnel. They came in, I got their credit card easily, and after 6 months they realized they were paying for nothing and they churn.
Yeah.
I think just the craftsman or the sort of builder in me doesn't like churn. So I'm like, man, how do I really think about this differently? And I think that is a very important piece of this puzzle. How can you focus on customers and companies and prospects who are willing to go in and stay? And as part of that struggle to retain them, you basically do fewer things. And then you go back to doing more things. And then again, you see the blowback from customers or feedback from customers. So I think this sort of cycle actually continues. I think there is such a dichotomy that exists even because we are a very unique agents and apps company right now. It's similar to how in my previous company, we were both a desktop and a server virtualization company, which is actually was quite a dichotomy because desktops were about 10,000 entities, lighter weight entities, and you would spin another 1,000 a day or a month, depending on your use case. Well, servers were actually pets, while desktop was cattle. And you have to think about pets and cattle very differently when you're trying to virtualize them. And we had to do both. And it is not easy to do both sides of this. And I think right now apps and agents, we have the same things. Agents are actually a little bit more like cattle. There's lots and lots of those things. And they're like pets. Every button, every sort of anything that went beyond half a second response time matters. The world of agents be like, yeah, whatever, it can take 5 seconds to respond. It's thinking and it's doing all sorts of things. So there's a lot of sort of barbell thinking that's going on in our heads right now. And it's a struggle, I think, going back to vertical versus horizontal, the PLG versus SLG mode. The fact that the design has to be that good and finessed and polished, and even for the conversational surfaces and the app surfaces, versus forward deployed engineering and customizing it and putting applied AI on it and so on. This is a struggle. I think we face it every day, and yet the bias in me as a founder is not to give up on either. Because there are large enterprises whose have to deliver data, code and weights. That is the last mile of engineering. And yet, even when we deliver to IT, finally the grassroots users' ability to really use the product is about the PLG design. If the grassroots user is not able to use this with as little friction as possible, like the way Lovable is, or like the way Cursor is, or even better, like the way ChatGPT is, then you'll have churn. You will have churn within a year. So whenever somebody says, are you a PLG company and SLG company? I'm like, you have to be both. Even an SLG company, within a year, if it couldn't be attractive, delightful for the grassroots, by reasons of subscription, they'll churn. Because nobody signs 5-year deals anymore. So you have less than a year to prove to the grassroots that you're a PLG company.
Yeah.
So net for me, this idea of vertical and horizontal actually are quite interweaved into each other. And on one hand, we have to deliver distribution at scale.
Yeah.
With grassroots saying, I think I can know how to handle this on my own without any of you guys intervening or intermediating or even IT coming and telling me how to do what to do. And on the other, you're delivering context for which requires data connectors and workflow code and model weights and things like that with forward deployed kind of modeling.
So in a way, I think you and I are agreeing that I think most people would agree that when you're hiring execs or like in general talented people, they need to be T-shaped.
I was that was the moment you said most people agree about execs. I think I knew you were going to say T-shaped.
It's like you want them to have a lot of breadth, but specific areas where they go deep and solve really deep problems.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And by the way, on an every week basis, they're rolling up their sleeves, going deep into war rooms, but also strategic enough to take a step back.
And I feel like the modern software with AI has to be T-shaped.
Absolutely. And by the way, it is elusive to find T-shaped people.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done. To say that I can think strategically. This week, I'm not going to go intervene in my people's work. And next week, I'm deep into it because I have to fight fires and stuff. Not easy to find such people. And that AI will be hard. That is both broad and deep. But I feel like the next 10 years, 20 years, that's what we have to continue to build towards. The word context and memory, I don't know, maybe one last word from you on this, on context and memory. Because obviously there's a part of it that you could say prompt engineering with frontier models can solve it. Or you got to go deep vertically and build models, post-trained models, distilled models on a per customer basis. It's, by the way, a classic horizontal versus vertical problem. Because in one case you can say, I have a horizontal model, it's a frontier model, and I can just bring enough specificity with the prompt that has all the context that you need to solve a use case, even for the deepest pharma, healthcare, whatever problem, versus I got to go vertical deep enough to build to fine-tune a model or to reinforcement learn a model or something. What's your thinking on that?
So, if you want your system to behave in a very specific way, in specific context, I feel like these are different tools, right? So you can train a specialized model with data. You can have lots of data sitting in your long-term memory and fetch the right examples as context. Or you can write custom code that emulates some of that logic that you want. I feel like all three of them, it just
depends on the use case.
It depends on the use case. There are different tools. But the fact that you need to know a lot about how to navigate different contexts in different nuances and specificity, that's the fundamental requirement.
Again, this goes back to the breadth versus depth thing, the T-shaped thinking. Like, do you have enough forward deployed people who are good at writing prompts? Enough of them need to know how to fine-tune models to them. And whether you have both of these in your skill set or not. And that is a founder bias too. Right? Don't you think it comes down to founder bias?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because again, it goes back to, am I quickly trying to build a $50 million ARR business and sell it off? Will I look down the barrel of a gun because at 50 I don't know what to do next? And by the way, it's really hard if you didn't build the chops for breadth, visibility, extensibility, these toolings that you're talking about. At 50, it's really hard to then learn those skills because now you have all sorts of customers who are like, man, just don't come and upsell more to me because you're not stretchy. I can't stretch your platform to do more things. Now go to another customer. That way, I think I'm also lazy. I'm like, you know what? I need to sell more to the same customer. And that is a horizontal bias. that if I found a good buyer and there are more use cases, can my platform deliver more use cases? Because I've already built some trust with them.
Yeah.
They like my customer success, customer support, forward deployed people. Isn't it easier to go get more use cases from them and to have 100,000 customers and 200,000 customers where you're just doing one little thing, but you can't do more than that because your platform is not horizontal enough. I think it's basically that bias.
Yeah.
Can you have good 5, 10, 20,000 customers which just have more use cases, but then your infrastructure has to be extensible enough?
Yeah. I do think that it's not a clear case, one versus the other. There are problems where it is worth polishing down to the single nanometer and get it in the right shape so that you're doing that one narrow thing, but you're doing it so much better than anybody else. And the way you get to do that is by having a very large customer base.
I do feel though that there is a founder bias on data versus design.
Yeah.
Let's say that intelligence is now required for everything, but data versus design. Data means infrastructure. If you have a chops for data and design, you try to build both.
Yeah.
If it's only design and it's $10 ASP per seat, then I think you would basically say, look, it's okay to have $10 product, but go searchable. Because your mind space can only do, to learn the other thing on data is a much bigger problem, much different problem. It's a much different mindset as well. But if you want to, I think we feel like we have both chops, data and design. Not that I'm a designer, but I think the passion for it and to know what good looks. So I think the horizontal and vertical things are, because data makes it extremely horizontal for you, stretchy, customizable, this, that, whatever. And then design makes it specific enough and so on. So if you feel like you have both, then you probably have to attack it both ways, or you want to attack it both ways.
Yeah.
Good discussion. Obviously, we had this thing where we were multi-hypervisor in Spirit at Nutanix. And initially it was Spirits. It was like just that. Okay, in Spirit we are multi-hypervisor. But if you didn't have a second and a third one, then it's just a pipe dream. So very early on when we initiated 2 other hypervisors, we actually became a multi-hypervisor company, which became a great sort of Loja bulwark against say VMware. We are multi-hypervisor. And I am seeing the same kind of thing where we're like, okay, if we had to be good at all data, not just Salesforce data, then we can do better than Salesforce and AI, because people have other things that they have to. They have marketing stack from someone else and support stack from someone else and product stack from someone else and so on. So this idea of really being good at diversity is probably what makes for horizontal play or something.
So here's another thought that I've had over the years is that, and I'm specifically talking about early stage companies, right? That what you need is almost like a pyramid structure, that your sales and marketing is super narrow focused. Your product management is slightly broader, and your engineering is way broader. And that's the ideal place to be, because then that gives you, the sales needs that
tip of the arrow.
Yeah.
That's a very valid point. And then, by the way, even engineers, the way they prioritize sprints.
Yeah.
Because when sales says something, product needs to act on it, engineers need to sprint plan that thing. But to say that they have given up their future thinking for that one sprint is where the problem lies.
Yes.
Like, how do they mix and match their ambition with the tactical nature of that sprint, because the salesperson is asking for it now? That's where the T-shaped thinking really needs. Even within engineering, that's where it needs to come in.
Yeah.
Because you still need to plan your sprints as you plan your year. Planning the year because you have the vision of being horizontal versus really tactically solving the thing for this next 2 sprints. I think that's where the short-term horizon thinking and the long-term horizon thinking both have to balance themselves.
Yeah.
It's such a paradox, man. I mean, just having this discussion on duality with somebody in my company recently, and I think Obviously, the negative mind will call it schizophrenic. There's paradox thinking, there's barbell thinking, there's tightrope walk. Because on a tightrope, you can overdo one, and all of a sudden you'll have a real problem on the other side. You'll fall if you just do it one.
In some ways, it's also a function of the resources you have available.
The talent too, beyond just capacity of resources. Is the talent, does it sleep well? Having to keep building new things with no leverage. Because if you try to think of the leverage, they will be extensible, customizable things. But the same code can extend and customize it.
And at early stage, adaptability matters a lot too, right? Because you're going to do pivots. Or at least you want to have the degree of freedom to do pivots, even if...
You look at HubSpot versus Salesforce. They're probably both adaptable companies. But one of them had the Oracle bias of big enterprises, or just the fact that they use Oracle, that they could build an object model. And maybe this was basically the founder as well at Salesforce, who basically had that architecture in mind, that I can make this object model customizable. Versus at HubSpot, they just went after SMB and they said, we'll live in the SMB world forever. And even till today, the deployment models of HubSpot are US only, AWS only, versus the other one that says we'll do private data centers and we'll be everywhere and so on. So again, a lot of it also depends on, not that Salesforce is any less adaptable than HubSpot, but there's a bias that both of them actually brought in. And the founders had their different biases as well.
So let me ask you another question. So this is another advice that I got about very early stage, like PMF stage or pre-PMF stage, that like when people go and say my TAM is 2 billion, 10 billion, 100 billion, they're basically deluding themselves. And what they should be doing is saying, what is my ASP? And with that, how many customers do I need to get to 100 million in revenue? And they should have basically a list that says, these are the customers that I'm going to focus. If my ASP is 100K, then I just need a list of 1,000 customers. And let me craft this list to be very specific, very intentional, so that I build a product that serves them really well. And once I've cracked 10 million out of that 100 million, then I can expand that 100 million to 500 million and then to a few billion and then eventually go there. Early stage, you should be so specific that you're not targeting more than 100 million in revenue.
Yeah, look, if it's a $10 ASP times 5 employees in a company, that's $50 a month. You're probably looking at Fortune 100,000. So there's a lot of spray and pray and churn built into it. But if your ASP is even 10,000, not 50 or 100, now account-based marketing matters and churn is less and less normalized. At 100,000, churn is like extremely like, what? You had churn. 500,000, million, you're talking about pain, like when you lose a customer. So account-based marketing, the ability to gather data around the customers, have every spoke of your company, whether it's website visits to email marketing to SDR functions to data collection to events and channel and trucks and all sorts of things that you got to do for that one account. It's a hub and spoke thinking where the hub is the account itself. So you've got to get that precise about account-based marketing. But depends on whether you're playing in global 5,000 or global 50,000 or global 100,000.
So the particular advice was that if you're trying to chew a market that's bigger than 100 million at pre-PMF stage, then you're taking too big a bite and you're not being focused enough. And if it is much less than 100 million, then of course you just...
Basically it is to say that, look man, independent of the sort of hookah bar thinking on TAM, what's your SAM? Serviceable addressable market. And that is a function of your initial product and resources and constraints that you have. And if you couldn't even service the first 10 million, what does the TAM have to do with it anyway? So you have to be specific with servicing these people. I'm a really big fan of Will Guidara's. So Will Guidara is a restaurateur. He had 2 Michelin star restaurants in New York. And he wrote a book and has a good YouTube following as well. This method is called unreasonable hospitality. Unreasonable hospitality is really giving people way more than they expect. And we are using it everywhere in the company, including department to department, which is, by the way, one of the hardest things to scale is respect of a customer and a provider within the company. Not outside the company, but within the company. Because marketing has an internal customer, and people ops has an internal customer, and engineering has an internal customer, product management has an internal customer too. And I think if you get that unreasonably hospitable, focus. Because going back to product design and UI and chiseling and polishing and finessing, getting to the first $10 million will require that kind of unreasonable hospitality as well. To those small number of customers. Knowing fully well that, look, not just my use case, but I'll have a stretchy platform that can take me to 2 billion and 5 billion and so on and so forth. Yeah, so I think the bias of the founder matters, and whether you can be both T-shaped, basically a T-shaped company or not, or T-shaped software or not, and whether you're both good at data and design. I think those are the ways I think how companies will be built and are being built. We have a little bit of time. We'll probably let you conclude on this last 1 hour and then seed MCP versus A2 a little bit, and maybe come back to the next episode and talk about this versus that. We talked about horizontal versus vertical. We'll spend a little bit more time into MCP versus A2A, which gets hyper-technical, but I think it is about LLMs and it's about design and architecture, which I mean we are struggling with too, because we have 3 really good engines, a RAG engine, a SQL engine, and an API engine through MCP and tools. And yet there's a fourth thing called A2A that's coming in. And so maybe a little bit about seeding in your head what MCP is for the audience. And why is it so viral right now?
So MCP, Model Context Protocol, I think came out of Anthropic to essentially define a standard through which LLMs could make API calls. Like, I think what was happening was that if you're in Claude or ChatGPT or anywhere, it's a very powerful reasoning model, but unless it has access to the data sitting in your Salesforce or in your file system or anywhere else, it can't do much. And people were building these custom solutions to bring in this context and be able to take actions and write back. And somebody said, why don't I create a standard around it? And that is such an obvious idea in retrospect that obviously it took off, because it's like you have a really powerful engine, but it doesn't have wheels to go anywhere.
It reminds me of the way Linux built its device driver community. It's crowdsourcing, complete crowdsourcing. Compared to FreeBSD, which was actually a really cool operating system. Or even back in the day, we'll talk about that too, but back in the day, MySQL versus Postgres. Closed ecosystem. Purist in some sense versus an open ecosystem. It says, look, you can build storage engines, and by the way, you can build a backup software on top of this and whatever else. Something about crowdsourcing.
And you think about it, technically there's not that big a difference between REST as a standard and MCP as a standard. There's just a little bit of extra sort of language-based context to help the...
There's something about discovery which REST punted on. If you go back to networking protocols back in the 90s, there's something about hierarchical thinking in IP that really made it globally discoverable. And the fact that DNS came in and authoritative servers were important, and I think it was just dynamically reachable and addressable and discoverable. That's the kind of power I'm seeing in MCP, that there is discovery built in. There's publishing built in, like how do you publish what you have and so on. And the fact that we'll talk about hierarchical as well, because we feel that it needs to be as hierarchical as IP address namespaces, which will get into agents. And there's some fascinating next episode. I'm just itching to talk about it. But it is better than REST in those many ways. Because REST was I would call REST Ethernet, but not discoverable.
Hmm.
You had to broadcast your way into Ethernet, ARP and things like that. But it was not hierarchical enough. And even the way namespacing of Ethernet was extremely private. Okay, fine, I build Ethernet adapters of this kind, I'll get this kind of first 2 bits versus someone else.
It sounds like you're talking about a very interesting idea, which probably MCP is not yet, but
Not yet,
could be.
it's not. It can be today, and we'll talk about the URL scheming of MCP as well.
Yeah.
This geeks me out a lot. It's one of my favorite topics right now is MCP and SQL and tools. But then there is this other protocol called A2A as well. Say more on that.
So I guess it hasn't seen as much traction, and I haven't heard even people talk about A2A as much lately. When it came out, people were asking me questions in almost every other meeting. But I think the fundamental idea is that MCP is more like a client-server kind of protocol, where you're delegating some task to some other tool. That tool could be AI enabled or not. It could just be plain old software, or it could be AI enabled. But A2A is designed for essentially 2 autonomous systems collaborating. The interactions could be asynchronous. One could make a request, move on, and at some point come back and look at whether they got a response or not.
Looks like one of them is, okay, let's build one good agent.
Yeah.
And the other one is, can we have 2 agents talk to each other? And there's a sequencing here.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see, I just hope that we can push the MCP community to think hard enough about looking at another agent, like another IP address, which could also be in the same MCP namespace, as if an agent is a tool as well. So I think there's some very interesting sort of thinking here. I tend to always go back to how were things 30 years ago and why are they any different right now? And more often than not, I come to the same conclusion. They're not very different.
Yeah.
So we'll spend some time on that in the next episode. It's going to be fascinating. It's going to be maybe for a little bit more around product managers and architects than this one, which is probably more for founders and even for business people.
Yeah.
Fascinating connect post-summer.
Yeah.
We didn't tell the audience that we're going to take a summer break, but it looks like it ended up being that way. But thanks again for this last hour and a half.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.